Hi, welcome back to my garden on the east coast of Canada. It is late May here in the garden and we are right at our average last frost date. We haven't had frost for about 2 weeks, but our average last date is right about now. Our entire property is 1/3 of an acre. That includes house, driveway, and gardens, but we managed to pack a lot in. We grow food, herbs, we have lots of ornamental borders, as well as a fairly substantial cutting garden, and that's where we are going to start. The cutting garden here right behind me is built around this little greenhouse that we made out of recycled windows. We've got some raised beds, some in-ground rows. The cutting garden is mostly annuals, but there is a bit of a mix of perennials as well as some garlic that I planted here last year too that will definitely move to a different place next year. It's right here in the center and it will be out of here by probably the beginning of July. And that does leave room to plant another crop here. So I'm going to try my best to continue planting seeds, something I did not do last year, so that I have something to fill the spaces as they become available. The first raised bed here on the corner is full of feverfew, which is a beautiful cut flower filler. The tallest stems have been here for 2 years. And feverfew doesn't come back reliably, so I did have a lot of empty space. And all of the small ones were started from seed this past spring and planted out about 3 weeks ago. So that's going to give us a good succession too, because some of them will be ready much earlier and then the rest of them will come in hopefully within about a month. Feverfew can easily be planted in the fall and overwintered here in Zone 6. And it comes back very reliably, but the next year I do notice I lose about 1/3 to 1/2 of it. So I filled this bed again this year, topped it up a little because the soil level was getting pretty low. And I haven't decided if I'm going to leave these in here for another year or if I'm going to pull them out and start from scratch again next year. This bed started out with some double tulips and they've come out over the last 2 weeks, and I have replanted this with sweet peas. I put in some bamboo canes. I ran out and went to get more but couldn't actually find any, so we have a bit of a partial trellis here that I need to figure out. I'll be heading to town later to see what else I can find because they are really starting to grow up and they're going to need something to climb ASAP. This is the garlic. I grow music variety. I think there's about 70 to 80 in here. And I'm watching for scapes at the moment. Hopefully we'll get garlic scapes soon and then we'll be able to flip this bed in July. This one is a bit of a mix of things that I don't grow a lot of. In the foreground we have Sweet William. Over on the other side there's some Scabiosa, and I'm pretty sure on this side we have some annual phlox. And I do like to use this mostly in smaller arrangements. Sweet William I haven't done a lot of in the past, but I know it is gorgeous, has a nice scent to it, most varieties anyway. Now this garden actually started its life as a perennial herb garden. These 8 raised beds did anyway. I had one totally full of chives. This one was oregano until last year. This one actually that we just looked at is full of saffron crocus, but the foliage dies back in the spring and it's going to pop up and bloom in the fall. This one had elephant garlic in last year and it looks like I missed a few bulbils when digging them up, so they came up, which is really good because I didn't plant any this past fall. So it looks like we'll have 6 bulbs of elephant garlic, which is great. And just the other day I came in and I stuffed about 60 gladiolas corms in between. So hopefully that won't disturb the garlic too much, but I'm not going to keep this bed empty for the sake of 6 bulbs of elephant garlic when I can just buy some more in the fall. So hopefully the 2 of them will be in there pretty harmoniously and then we'll get a crop of both. The only perennial herbs that are still in here is tarragon, and tarragon is my favorite. You can see though this bed has a lot of problems, and problems come in the form of weeds. There is clover, dandelions, thistle, and there are so many other things coming up in here. I'm going to dig out the best pieces that I can and move them just into other areas of the yard so that I can fully clear this, top it up because it's come down almost 6 inches. And then I can replant this hopefully in the next week or so. I've been avoiding this as it's a bit of a big job. And the last 2 beds have lilies. Now this bed is mostly the Oriental hybrids, which are going to bloom a little bit later. And then this one has the Asiatics. So it looks like I mixed them up a little bit. This is a good opportunity to take a look at the difference in foliage. This one is an Oriental hybrid and these ones are the Asiatics. So looks like those ones are a little bit shorter. We have some taller ones over there. Oh, those ones look like Orientals as well. I might have to move those when they bloom. The Orientals are the ones that have an amazing scent, and they're also less bothered by lily beetles, the scarlet red lily beetle, than the Asiatics are. So I do love to grow these, and I have a lot more in my ornamental borders in the front yard as well. So I do have a bit of a hole here, and I stuck a couple more bulbs in just the other day. We're still waiting for those to come up. Salmon party, and looks like something's been digging. That's a hole. We do have a lot of squirrels that like to help me with my landscaping. Now this greens container we planted together, and it has been great, but it is coming to an end. The mustard is flowering, which I love. It's good for the pollinators this time of year. It looks great. And I'm actually still using that lettuce, but it's starting to get a little bit bitter. And I do have more coming up in the vegetable garden as well, which is right up there. We're going to head over there shortly. Now, in addition to all the flowers, I also love to grow herbs as well. Here's some of the pots that I planted up just a week ago. Moroccan mint has grown quite a bit in the last week. Lemongrass not so much, but it's still getting its roots into the soil. And there's a rosemary. Around the greenhouse, looks like I need to stake my phlox. We had a crazy windstorm yesterday and ended up pouring with rain, which is great because it did not rain for all of May. It was so dry. There's a few small little mini daffodils, some bachelor's buttons, a phlox. There's a beautiful white climbing rose there, and some other daffodil foliage that's starting to die away. And then we have a little bit of an oregano collection. The first one is hot and spicy oregano, and these have spread quite a bit. I'm going to need to cut these back a bit this year. The golden oregano and a variegated. And you can see what happens with variegated oregano is it tends to revert back to green, and the green foliage is much more vigorous than the variegated foliage. So I go through here about twice a year and I pull out all of the plain green to keep it looking neat. But that is a bit of an ongoing task. The chives are flowering, and I pulled quite a bit of the flower heads off yesterday and put them in my dehydrator because they are edible and they are delicious. And I love to dry them and make a chive blossom salt to use throughout the year. So I just took the ones that were more than half open, and then I'll come up and do the rest probably in about a week, maybe less. Here's our perennial pot, and if you watched me plant that up, you might notice the chives are missing, and I actually just cut those down. They are already starting to grow back. It's only been 2 days. But I did that because I wanted some for the kitchen, and when I went to pull the blossoms off, it was about to pull the chives out of the pot, so they haven't quite rooted in yet. Chives are pretty hardy. You can beat them up and they'll come right back. So in this pot we have the chives, thyme, there's that piece of tarragon, and some regular Greek oregano, and this is the only one that I actually use for cooking. These other ones are just ornamental. And chives, we have our other perennial pot that has rosemary, tricolor sage, lemongrass, and lemon verbena, and these things are not quite hardy, so I put these particular 4 things in a pot to bring inside over the winter and see how they grow indoors. Next, the thyme collection. There is a variegated thyme here, and then this one is lemon thyme, which is my favorite. We had quite a bit of dieback on the thyme because it was such a wet such a wet summer last year. I'm pretty sure that's the culprit because thyme has always done really, really well here. And I don't actually have a regular thyme planted in the ground, but that one in the pot will get moved out here at the end of the season. This snowball viburnum is just waiting for me to decide where to plant it. I picked that up a couple of weeks ago, and this is a key lime. Had a rough winter indoors, but it's starting to grow, and it's starting to flower again too. So it's flowered a couple of times, but never really set any fruit, which is fine. I'm just keeping my eye on it and hoping to get a lot of good new growth. There is a large sage. This is just the regular sage, and then this one is golden sage. I think it was golden sage. These have both been here about 4 years now, so I might need to pull them out, replace them. And that doesn't mean I need to buy new plants. I may just take cuttings and then plant out the cuttings. This metal container is full of mint. If you grow mint, you'll know why it is in a metal container. It spreads like crazy. All of this came from just one plant. This is chocolate mint, which I love. And then this is a winter savory. Identical flavor to summer savory, but completely hardy. This has been here about 4 years as well. And this is my Meyer lemon that I grew from seed. It was every bit of 7 feet tall, and I chopped it back. I had to, otherwise I wasn't going to get it out the front door for the summer, and it's been outside. I repotted it finally. It's been needing repotting for about a year. And it was so windy yesterday that I stuck the pot in a bigger pot and wedged it with a brick because I was afraid it was going to fall over. It's probably going to stay that way for the whole year. But lots of new growth. It hasn't flowered yet. I think it's about 5, maybe 6 years old now. I'm really hoping to get some flowers this year. Colocasia made some appearances in videos last year, overwintered much better than it did the year before. And we actually have a ton of fruit on the giant shrub cherry. Not a giant cherry, I'm just calling it giant because it grew a lot last year. We haven't actually gotten any fruit off of it yet, and I'm not sure if it just fell off or if some creature got at it, but hopefully we will actually get these cherries this year. Well, let's head into the greenhouse because even though I have been planting like mad, I haven't done a very good job at keeping up. We have some mostly tomatoes and peppers. There's a few eggplants, and there are, where's my peanuts? Oh, they're underneath there. I have peanut plants, which I do not know where I'm going to plant. I need to find space for those. There are some watermelons on the bottom of that second shelf. A ton of squash and cucumbers. These are some zinnias, and I have some celosia and not amaranth. I didn't grow amaranth this year. Oh, celosia and gomphrena down there that need to be planted out. There are some sweet potatoes. There's some turmeric in there. There's, my daughter wanted to plant corn. That's in plug trays. This one is, oh, these are my asters. My son's pumpkins that he wanted to plant are right here. They are just coming up now. And then this is all my basil. I should have started basil weeks ago. I just was a little late getting it started. Lots of basil coming up though. There was one more tray of pumpkins, and it looks like, that's a stick. Yeah, looks like they are just starting to come up too. That's fantastic. And these are pumpkins I started a few weeks ago. And what are these? Oh, marigolds. I planted out most of the marigolds. These ones are going in the vegetable garden. I'm creating a bit of a marigold hedge that I'll show you. These are just the orange ones, but I do have white ones that went in the cutting garden too. Now, before we get to these in-ground rows, which are all planted and looking gorgeous, we're gonna swing around, come around behind the greenhouse. This is a new space we are developing. Some things in pots, some we've already planted. We're gonna get to that pretty soon. These are the things that need to be planted immediately. Maybe not so much the snapdragons. I have a couple of boxwood. I propagated these from cuttings, but they've been in these pots 2 years. They need to go out. I have foxgloves. I have asparagus. This is a great story right here because I grew these asparagus in this plug tray last year. It sat back here all winter, freezing and thawing dozens of times. And look, the crown isn't even completely buried in that one, and it's growing. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 asparagus plants that survived the winter sitting just like that. So I have to get these potted up or in the ground. Foxglove is ready to go out. These I just picked up for my kids to plant in their garden. A little English ivy, some dianthus, and some snapdragons. The cypress trees, which we potted up a few weeks ago, they're looking great. These are the rest of my peas and sweet peas, which don't have any place. And some daffodils that I just ended up sticking in pots. Plants are so resilient. These are yarrow that also lived in this plug tray all winter and obviously are fine. These ones all survived. Here's the lupins I grew from seed this year. They need to be potted up or planted also, but I think I know where they're going to go, and they may go directly in the ground. And just a few leftover herbs that didn't get planted in pots. I've also been hitting some neighbors' plant sales, and I have some few things in there, some geums, another brunnera, I already have one of those, a variegated Solomon seal, and a few other things. So this area is very much under construction. We laid down a couple of rows of cardboard under this mulch, but this stuff, whatever this is, I thought it was wild ginger. I'm not so sure now. I need to read into that a little bit more, but it is so prolific. The roots live long enough for the cardboard to break down, and then it just pops up. So I laid these stepping stones here just yesterday just to control it a little bit, because that's something I'm going to have to deal with. All the way down the property line, we're starting to plant some shrubs, mulching, just to make sure the property line's obvious, and to hopefully grow up and hide all of this mess that we have to look at, garbage and invasive stuff on the neighbor's side. There's no quick fix other than putting up a large privacy fence, but that's not something we want to do unless we absolutely have to. There's a little bit of mulch and some leftover pots there. We put in 4 new apple trees, and we are going to get some more blueberries and do something exciting here, which is going to involve moving the ranunculus bed. Not now though, because they are about to flower. Finally, we've had some trouble with this ranunculus this year. It wasn't looking so hot. Some of it is still yellow, but look, there's our first one. This looks like ranunculus bonbon, which is a bright pink. Looks like there's a light pink one down there too, but it's very short. Thank goodness for these ranunculus, because I've been really worried about them, but we have enough buds to definitely get me through a couple of weeks. Some yellow ones. These ones look dark, but it's hard to tell when they're immature. There are buds coming from those smaller ones too. I'd feel better if the foliage was a little bit thicker, but we'll take what we can get. This bed housed all of the tulips, and I did say I was going to try to leave the foliage from the candy prints. I actually need to deadhead those. Deadheading tulips just involves snapping the seed pod off. You don't have to cut the stalk. But it's really important if you want to keep tulips to leave the leaves until they've died back naturally. So luckily those varieties were on the end. I pulled out all the tulips and I replaced them with dahlias. So there are 5 dahlias in the back, 5 along the front, somewhere in the 12 to 16 inches apart range. And these are the Toronto and the Doll's Minuet, which I also would like to keep. So it's very convenient that all of the ones I wanted to keep were on the outside, so I could leave them and still make use of this bed. Oh, there's another herb pot. This one just has parsley and stevia. Oh, I planted some seeds in there too. Look at that. The dill is coming up. Fantastic. Now this bed had the overwintered cool flowers, and most of them didn't do so well. The exception would be the larkspur. The larkspur is looking fantastic. That's come up well, and then I also planted dahlias around those. So there's another probably 10 dahlias. Some of them didn't have foliage, some of them did. Here's one that is just starting to pop out of the ground now. I started my dahlias really early with the intention of taking cuttings. Never ended up taking those cuttings, but luckily I brought them outside on an overcast day. We didn't have a lot of wind or dramatic weather for that week, so they got hardened off properly and they are just fine. Daffodils in pots. Now you might remember these were daffodils I dug up last year and never got replanted, and they sat in my basement until February. I planted them in these crates, let them root in, brought them outside in late March, and they seem happy. So once they finish blooming and start to die back, I know exactly where I'm going to plant them. I'm just happy they survived. Now this is our seed bed that we planted together, and there's quite a few things popping up here too. That is a weed right there, but these are larkspur. Larkspur is coming up nicely. It's very obvious where I spilled my bells of Ireland. That's coming up really well. There is also stalk, and that's grown so slowly I am not sure we're going to see flowers out of that. There's a little bit of calendula. I'm pretty sure I had bupleurum in here. I only see 2 seedlings though. I think this one right there might be a bupleurum, and there might be a few. Yeah, I do see a few up there. This is going to be a mix. There are Chinese forget-me-nots that I see. There is nigella that I see. This is all nigella right there. Those are weeds. And then these are more lupins. I'm very happy to see all those pop up. So this is where it's a benefit that I've grown these things for multiple years, because I recognize them coming up as seedlings. And if you don't know what your seedlings are going to look like, it's really hard to know what to weed out. And by the time you do realize, it's going to be completely out of control, which is why it is helpful to plant things in straight rows, because it helps you to know what to weed out and what to not, rather than the chaos gardening that I sort of did in this bed here. And another sort of fail are these anemones. These barely started blooming and then started to die back. So I'm not 100% sure what happened in this bed, but it affected the Chinese forget-me-nots. They are tiny compared to last year. I've already put down a lot of new seed though. And the same thing with the Bupleurum. This is my only significant patch of Bupleurum and it is looking kind of pathetic. So I'm just waiting to see what happens here at the moment, but I may end up ripping all this out and then replanting it before long. So I did get a large delivery of soil that I'm still working through, but I need to get that out of here as soon as possible because it's a giant eyesore. But this is where the cutting garden starts. These are the beds we just looked at. We do eat on this picnic table. I do most of my potting up on this picnic table. Now we get to the in-ground rows, and these were all laid out in no dig style. When we put the greenhouse up, which was the first thing to go up in this area, we started to dig to lay these cement blocks, which were around the yard and other places. We just repurposed them and found hard-packed gravel underneath only an inch or so of topsoil. So there was no way I was digging up this whole entire area. Plus it was a little swampy and tended to flood in heavy rains, so we went up. This area is probably 8 inches higher than it was when we started, and it's draining better and everything's growing really well. So this row was stock, still is stock, interplanted with snapdragons, and it's working out really well. You can see both of those things beautiful and happy. There should be starting to see flowers on the stalk by now. The spring was weird. It stayed cold for a really long time and then got hot really fast. We normally have cooler spring for at least a few more weeks. Row number 2 is status. We lost a couple of them. I planted this in a video. We lost a handful, maybe, I think I see 2, 3, 4. We have a couple of rogue cats that are new this year that I don't recognize that have been digging up in here, but at least the damage has been minimal. This row has Rebecca, mostly was perennial, has been here for a couple years, but I put in a few seedlings this year with a little bit of fancy carnation in the back. I don't grow a lot of this, and it mostly just ends up as decor in my own home bouquets. Same as the Clarkia, or Godetia, sometimes you hear it called. There's a little bit of that back there. Then more larkspur. I love larkspur. I grow so much of it. And then more status. And this status is actually sending up flower stalks, as is the larkspur actually. The garden is growing and changing by the day. I cannot wait to see this in another 2 weeks' time. It's already beautiful. You can't forget to enjoy how it is now and not only looking forward to future. This one is yarrow, and this desperately needs to come out because I just can't get the weeds out from around it. There's oregano, there's Rebecca, there's grass. There's a lot of oregano actually. But the yarrow's been here for 3 years. It's starting to bud up, so as soon as it flowers and I use those stems, I'm going to take the colors that I prefer, divide them, and then plant them elsewhere so that I can get this row cleared out. This row is direct seeded cosmos, and most of them are coming up really well. I did a little initial weeding the other day. It's going to need more, but that's a start. The straw flowers, however, are looking gorgeous. So I don't want to ignore this giant eyesore back here. This was a large old building that had been torn down well before we moved in, and this shed tossed here. The shed needs to go this year, and we're really trying to think about what we can do to help make this not so ugly. We have a bunch of bricks that the kids have just been using to play with, which is fine. They're building houses. But we're going to be putting a patio back there in that nice shady spot behind the cutting garden. That's one of our projects. These pots need dealing with. Some of them have nothing in them. They just had annuals last year, but this one is a wisteria, which has survived in this pot for 3 years now and desperately needs to be potting up. So that's an immediate project. We also have a little frame pool that we put here for the kids, just a 10-foot wide, 3-foot deep, which is really nice even when the kids are in school for me to jump in after a hot day of gardening. So that's got to get set up soon. And we'll be planting up some pots too, just to help make it look a little bit nicer. because it has such a beautiful view from this direction. It's just a shame that it is such an eyesore in such an obvious corner of the yard. So leaving the cutting garden, we get to the vegetable garden. And I'm really happy that the gladiolas I had planted in here last year seems to have survived the winter. Gladiolas aren't supposed to overwinter here, but obviously they do. We didn't have too much of a rough winter though. There is another hole. That's a pretty significant hole. Something's been digging in my vegetable garden. This lettuce I've actually been using. I have a little bit of lettuce, some beets. Now I direct seeded all of this in a video, but I have some interesting weeds coming up as well. There's some poppies. There's quite a few poppies actually, which I haven't grown for a couple of years. But it's funny how some seeds will just sit and wait until the conditions are right. What I did actually plant though are these green onions, dill and cilantro, and then more mustard greens and lettuce, which I have started to use. And the broccolini, which is starting to head up. I might actually be able to cut some of these in a few days' time. And then we have calendula. I had calendula here last year, and it has obviously self-seeded, and I need to come in and thin those. I'll probably leave some of them. Now this is actually the second row. The first row has had some perennial flowers in it for the last 2 years that I'm going to let bloom and then move. These are aquilegias or columbine, and they are beautiful double varieties that I grew from seed. I use these in cutting. They are absolutely gorgeous. And then behind them are some delphiniums. A couple of them are significant enough that I should be able to divide them into multiple different plants. But right now that is just a really nice backdrop that helps disguise all of this ugly mess. My poor broken arbor back there. There are some more calendula and some spinach plants back there, which are starting to go to seed already, and some perennial onions that I don't really use much. I used a little bit this year. Seems a shame to get rid of them, but I may if I don't end up using them again. So row number 3 has my onions. I just put sets in this here. I sometimes grow them from seed, but we were away in February. So I didn't grow anything that I had to start that early. There's some direct seeded carrots coming up and some peas. This is where most of my bamboo canes went this year. This row I have a whole bunch of self-seeded flower filler coming up. This is auric. I moved a whole bunch. I may move these, or I might even leave them there. This row has tomatillos, and I love making tomatillo salsa. So these have only been in there a few days. They still need cages. I think there are 15 of them in this row. All of this cress self-seeded, and I'm just waiting to use that as bouquet filler, although there's so much of it I may take some out so that I can finish planting all of my tomatoes and peppers. And the remaining 4 rows are pretty much empty. They just need to be weeded, cleaned up, amended a little bit, and then those are going to be tomatoes and peppers, and what else do I have? Watermelons? Peanuts. I still need to figure out where I'm putting those. Now we have very heavy weed pressure back here around the asparagus. So I do have some asparagus that are in their 5th year, I think, so we've been using quite a bit. Here's what happens if I ignore the patch for 4 days and we get nice warm rain. Though it's, what is that, about 4 feet tall already? There's still spears coming up from the bottom that I can harvest though, and I may do that for my lunch today. And that's most of the productive side. This is more self-seeded cress. That is just prolific. I might have to be careful about growing that next year. The kids have been relocating bricks again. The shade garden around this big, beautiful old oak tree is really starting to fill out. I haven't done anything to that this year, so this is not weeded, not cleaned up in any way. There's quite a bit of hostas, a few different varieties of heucheras. You can see all the different hostas, and I did spray these a little bit with something called Bobex because the deer were nibbling a little bit. There's some Chinese May apple back there, and that's the native stinking hellebore with the nice green flowers. Oh, there's a foxglove too. Those are weeds, they need to come up. I love this little hosta. I love the big ones, but the little cute ones I like just as much. The astilbe is flowering, and it never flowers its best. I think it's too deep shade here for it, and I might try to move it. This is Curly Fries hosta. There's the remnants of some primulas. The primulas back here were gorgeous. There's still some nice pink ones back there. The yellow, I think, is wild mustard. I've got to take that out. That's a weed. But the ferns back there are beautiful. Other than the primulas, there's some single aquilegias. The grape hyacinths are finished. That's pretty much all there is to look at in there. But this is the shade garden with 0 work so far this year, and I'm pretty happy with that. I love having this garden here because this is a really great spot to sit in the afternoons. Keep in mind that it is not cleaned up. We actually have to come and weed the sandbox a little bit. And then this is just my kids' garden. They also have some cleaning up to do. But they're very happy that their pansies have overwintered from last year. They've stuck a couple Rebeckia in, and they have quite a few seeds planted too that will hopefully fill out this space. The mint bed is another project that I never got to clean up this spring when I should have. Those are all the dead stems from last year. I'll be using that as cut flower filler. I'm going to be drying a lot of herbs for tea pretty soon. When the foliage is a little bit younger, I end up getting a bit of a better flavor, so I like to try to dry a bunch of tea this time of year instead of waiting until fall. This is a 3x5 metal raised bed, and it is completely full of mint. Now the front yard is a little bit funny. We do have a few ornamental borders, but I haven't put a ton of work into them yet this year, except for a little bit of weeding. They do need a lot of significant work though. There is this little garden out by the road, which I do cut lilies and phlox, and early on in the season phlox foliage out of here too. But it gets very, very heavy weed pressure, and the soil isn't that great, so it definitely needs some work. Now, swinging into the middle is what I call the cutting garden overflow. There's a few perennials in here, which do take a lot of work to keep them weeded, but I'm starting to get on top of it, I think. The catmint is mostly ornamental. I use it in some smaller jar arrangements that I made last year. I'm not sure if I'll use them a lot this year. There's quite a bit of lavender though. I took a lot of lavender cuttings last year and I grew some from seed. What I'm going to do this year is wait and identify the strongest plants with the nicest color and the tallest stems, and then propagate that to make a lot more plants in the future. I take a lot of cuttings, and that's going to start to happen here shortly. There's a lot more self-seeded cress. Surprise, surprise. I did put some marigolds in here. These are the white swan marigolds. I can't wait to see those. I haven't grown those before. And the rest of this garden is direct seeded sunflowers, which you can see they've been very happy about the rain this week, and zinnias. And I did one round about 3 weeks ago, which is what you can see now. And I planted the same amount. I did that again 3 or 4 days ago. So it's been raining. They should be coming up anytime. So I'm keeping my eye out for those. Now this little shade garden, which sort of happened by accident, just to act as a bit of a holding space for things that I didn't know where else to put, is actually my favorite spot in the yard right now. I have white feather hosta, which is at its best right now. This big, gorgeous lilac bush that is just starting to bloom. I have some bleeding heart, some regular pink bleeding heart, as well as some white bleeding heart. There were quite a few tulips here, but some of them were nibbled by deer, and everything that bloomed I pulled because I want to take out the tulips and basically replace all of this free space at the front with those daffodils that I have in crates. So this is where I'm going to put those. I will also probably put all the foxgloves in this area. There's a brunnera that is gorgeous. I have another one of those to plant, but by far the most exciting thing here is the Mecanopsis, Blue Himalayan Poppy that I grew from seed last year. It has a flower bud, and I've been watching it every day. I think there's actually a second flower bud. There are 2 plants together in this little space right here. These are the Bailey variety. There's another little one. This is this year's seedling. I only had one survive because I let the pot dry out. That one was new this year, so it's going to flower next year. I'm unsure if I can expect these second-year plants to overwinter again, so we'll see what happens. I am starting new seed. I have 2 more trays started. And then over here under this white bleeding heart, this is linghome. There are 2 plants here as well. I don't see any flower spikes on these yet, but I am watching those. And when it does bloom, I'm going to make a whole video dedicated to it. I've been taking footage every few days, so make sure that you subscribe so that you'll see that video when it comes out, hopefully within a month. You can watch my Instagram for that too. I'll put my Instagram link up here because I will be posting pictures, multiple pictures, as soon as it gets close to opening. Now, right in the front of the house, I haven't put a ton of work into these yet because we need to replace our step, and we might actually make it bigger, let it go across the front of the house under this window. So everything on this side may have to come out. On the other side, it's actually looking really, really good. All of my cutting peonies are in here. I have a lot of lilies, lavender along the front, but I need to do a lot of work with bulbs. There's actually some mums that I got in the fall last year that I stuck in the ground just to see if they would overwinter, and they did. And then some beautiful spring flowering dianthus and creeping phlox that is at its best right now. This time of year might be my absolute favorite season in the garden. Everything is lush and green and gorgeous. There's no diseases yet. The deer have not demolished anything significant, which is always good. And even though there isn't a ton in bloom, a lot of the spring flowers are coming out, and it's just exciting to see the garden change from day to day. Everything's growing so quickly. And at least we finally got some rain, because the entire month of May being dry was a little rough when I had so many things to plant. We're on a well, so I don't really have endless supply of water. Our well does tend to go dry also if we have a significant year of drought. So my rain barrels are now full, which is good because you saw the greenhouse, and so you know how much stuff I have to plant. So with that being said, I think I'm going to change and get back to work, because no, I don't work in the garden in a dress, but this was a garden tour. So like, subscribe, comment, all those good things. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.